started with a sound, not one I could easily name. Too thin to be a voice, too rhythmic to be the wind. It had lodged in the back of my memory for years, like a splinter I never quite pulled out. And then, one evening in early autumn, I heard it again. I was walking along the shoreline of my hometown, the same shore I'd sworn never to return to after I left at 18. The town hadn't changed much. Half-rotten boardwalk stalls, faded pastel beach houses, the taste of salt thick in the air. But the pier was still there, or rather, the bones of it. The abandoned pier had been condemned since the summer I turned 12. The summer a boy named Daniel Avery disappeared beneath it. One moment, we'd been daring each other to go further and further into its dark, sea-stinking underbelly. And the next, he was gone. Everyone said he'd drowned. I wasn't so sure. And even after 2 decades, that pier loomed like a rib cage jutting out into the gray water. Splintered planks, rusted nails, the smell of rot and brine. Locals gave it wide berth. Parents warned kids about the undertow, about getting caught in the beams. But every once in a while, when the tide was just right, people whispered that you could hear Daniel's voice calling or warning. No one agreed on which. That evening, I shouldn't have walked that far down the beach. I told myself it was nostalgia, but really it was something heavier, something closer to guilt. My shoes sank in the damp sand as the tide licked higher, the sun dropping like a dying ember into the horizon. The waves slapped the pier's supports, spraying cold mist against my face. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft, curling between the wooden stilts. At first, I thought it was the wind threading through the gaps, but no, it had shape. It had weight, like someone breathing words directly into my ear. Though I stood alone, I froze. Every instinct screamed for me to turn back, but instead, I stepped closer, the crunch of shells under my shoes sounding deafening in the growing dusk. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat echoing like a drum in the hollow space beneath the pier. "Daniel," I whispered before I could stop myself. My voice cracked on the name, raw with memories I'd tried to bury. The whisper answered, not in words I could understand, not exactly, but something moved in that sound, like the cadence of a child's plea. I swore it was coming from just beneath the slats, somewhere in the darkness where the water pooled and the beams sank deep. The tide rolled higher, swirling with froth. I should have left. I should have walked away. Instead, I dropped to my knees and peered between the gaps in the pier. What I saw wasn't Daniel. It wasn't anyone. It was only the black water shifting beneath the wooden skeleton, catching faint glimmers of the fading light. But for one split second, I thought I saw a hand rise just above the surface, fingers pale and wrinkled like bloated driftwood. Then it sank soundlessly back into the dark. I staggered to my feet, stumbling backward, my pulse racing so hard I thought I might collapse. The whisper followed me, sliding up the beams and into the air around me, clinging to the salt spray like a parasite. I don't remember running back into town, only shut the door of the little rental house behind me. The sound was gone, but not forgotten. That night, lying awake with the waves pounding in the distance, I realized something with sickening certainty. The whisper hadn't been calling my name by accident. Sleep never came. I lay there, listening to the house groan against the coastal wind, to the hollow moan of the tide crawling up the sand. I kept telling myself it was exhaustion, that the whisper had been my mind dredging up ghosts from a childhood I'd never reconciled. But around 3 in the morning, when the tide reached its peak, I heard it again. This time, it came through the open window, seeping between the glass panes. Soft, strained, like something trapped below the surface and desperate to rise. I slammed the window shut, heart hammering, but I didn't sleep after that. By dawn, the whisper had retreated, leaving only silence. The gray sky hung low and heavy, a promise of rain. I made coffee with shaking hands, staring out toward the waterline, where the pier jutted like a carcass. From this distance it looked harmless enough, just rotting wood against restless sea. But I knew better. It took me until afternoon to work up the nerve to step outside. The town was quiet, the off-season lull leaving only locals to drift through the streets. A gull wheeled overhead, shrieking like it was warning me away. I found myself at the diner, a greasy little place called Marty's Shack that hadn't changed in 20 years. Same red vinyl booths, same faded jukebox no one used. Marty himself was still behind the counter, his hair gone white, his face sagging like melted wax. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Well, I'll be damned," he rasped, "if it isn't Caleb Morris. Thought you'd put this town behind you for good." I tried to smile, but it came out brittle, just passing through. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You picked a hell of a week to pass through. The tides have been strange things washing up. Folks keep saying they hear." He trailed off, eyeing me carefully. "Well, you probably know the stories better than most." The coffee scalded my tongue, bitter and grounding. "They still talk about it?" "Talk?" He barked out a humorless laugh. "That pier is this town's curse. Every few years, someone gets it in their head to go poking around under there. Never ends well." I wanted to ask him, wanted to blurt out that I'd heard Daniel's voice, that I'd seen something rise from the water, but the words stuck. Instead, I said, "Do you think he drowned?" The diner went silent. Even the old clock above the counter seemed to pause. Marty's eyes hardened. Best not to dig at that. Some things are better left at the bottom. A shiver climbed my spine. I left soon after, unable to stand the way he kept watching me, like he knew exactly what I'd heard. The rain had started by the time I stepped back onto the street, soft needles prickling my skin. The pier loomed in the distance, half shrouded in mist, but I couldn't look away. I felt tethered to it, like an invisible cord stretched from its decaying beams straight into my chest. And then I heard it again, not faint, not subtle this time. The whisper rode on the wind, weaving between the raindrops. Caleb, my name, clear as day, breathed in a voice I hadn't heard since I was 12. Daniel's voice. My knees nearly buckled. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound was inside me, vibrating in my bones. "Caleb, come back." The rain blurred the pier into a smudge of gray and black. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a figure standing at the end of it, pale and dripping, waving me closer. When I blinked, it was gone. That night, I locked every window, drew every curtain. I told myself I'd leave in the morning, that I'd drive inland away from this cursed shoreline and never look back. But when the tide came in again, the whisper came with it. Only this time, it didn't stay outside. I heard it at the foot of my bed. The whisper at the foot of my bed wasn't like the others. Before, it had been distant, an echo threading through the tide. But now it was close, so close I could hear breath in it, wet and shuddering. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My eyes strained against the dark, the moonlight barely piercing the thin curtains. I swore I saw a shape there, hunched at the foot of the mattress, something pale, dripping, swaying with the rhythm of the waves outside. And then it leaned closer. "Caleb." My body finally broke free. I lashed out, fumbling for the lamp, knocking it to the floor. When the bulb cracked and died, the room fell into blackness. By the time I found the courage to turn the overhead light on, the space was empty, but the sheets beneath my feet were damp. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner until dawn, every creak of the house sending jolts down my spine. When the gray light finally seeped in, I found small puddles of seawater tracked across the wooden floorboards. They led from the bed straight to the window, but the window was still locked. That morning, desperation shoved me back into town. I went not to Marty this time, but to the library, though it was little more than 2 rooms stacked with dust and mildew. The same elderly woman still sat behind the desk, her hair pinned in a severe bun. She recognized me, of course. They all did. "I need records," I said, my voice rasping, "from the summer of 1997, about the pier." Her lips thinned, but she led me into the back, the smell of paper and damp wood pressed around me as she set down a brittle box of newspapers and police reports. I rifled through them with shaking hands. Headlines stared back. "Local boy lost to tide. Pier condemned after tragedy. No body recovered." But then, deeper in the stack, something else. Old reports from decades earlier. Undertow, China 23, 1996, even as far back as 1922. Every 20 to 30 years, a child vanished near the pier. Always the same story. Last seen playing beneath the beams, then gone without a trace. The authorities blamed the current, the riptide, the decay of the structure. But reading them all together, I felt bile rise in my throat. It wasn't coincidence, it was pattern, and I was the only one still alive who'd heard Daniel's voice. That night, I tried again to resist. I locked myself in the bathroom, ran the faucet loud enough to drown out the sound of the tide. I stuffed towels under the door, pressed my hands over my ears until they ached, but the whispers seeped through anyway. "Caleb, why did you leave me?" The mirror fogged as if from unseen breath. Words formed in the condensation, jagged and childlike. "Come knees gave out. I slid against the cold tile, teeth chattering. And even then, part of me wanted to listen, because beneath the horror of it, beneath the salt stink fear, there was something else. A pull. The moon cut a white path across the water, leading straight to the pier, and I walked it. Each step felt heavier, like the tide was already dragging me down. The beams rose in front of me, massive and crooked, barnacles clinging to their bellies. The air reeked of brine and rot, but beneath it, I smelled something sharper, decay, sweet and rancid, close, coming from the darkness under the pier. I should have turned back. I should have run until the town was nothing but a smear behind me. But instead, I stepped into the shadows, the water lapping at my ankles, my breath loud in my ears. And that's when I saw him, Daniel Avery, or what was left of him. He was standing waist deep in the black water. At first glance, he looked just as he had the last day I'd seen him. Skinny arms, shock of blonde hair, oversized t-shirt sagging around his shoulders. But then, the details twisted wrong. His skin gleamed too pale, too swollen, like driftwood waterlogged for years. His eyes were cloudy, irises drowned in milk-white haze. His hair floated around his face in stringy clumps, dripping steadily into the tide. Yet, when he smiled, it was the same smile he'd had when we were 12. The one he used to flash when he dared me to climb higher, to go further, to take one more step into danger. "Caleb," he said again, his voice bubbling as though spoken through water. "You came back." My throat tightened. "Daniel?" He nodded, tilting his head too far, the bones of his neck creaking. I waited. The waves surged, soaking my jeans. The beams groaned overhead, dripping cold rivulets onto my shoulders. I wanted to run, but my feet felt buried, stuck in the sucking sand. "You left me," Daniel whispered, his voice suddenly thin and sharp, echoing off the wood. "You ran, you didn't help." The memory ripped open. That day beneath the pier, the way his scream had sliced through the crash of the tide, the way I'd frozen, too afraid to dive in after him, the way the water had swallowed him whole, leaving only silence. I tried. My voice cracked, torn from my chest. God, I was just a kid. His cloudy eyes flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw something human in them. But then, his mouth stretched wider, impossibly wide. Salt water spilling from between his teeth. "You can help me now." The water surged higher, climbing my thighs, icy as knives. My heart slammed. I stumbled back, but the tide pulled stronger, dragging me toward him. The beams around us groaned like something alive. The whole pier shifting as if it leaned closer to listen. Daniel reached out a hand. It was pale, shriveled, fingers bloated like dead fish. Yet I knew, if I took it, I'd never surface again. "I don't belong here," I gasped. "You do," he whispered. And suddenly his voice wasn't just his. It was layered, dozens, maybe hundreds of voices beneath it. Men, women, children, all tangled together in a drowning chorus. "We all do." The tide rose to my chest, slamming me into a beam. My lungs seized with cold. I kicked, fought, tried to wrench free, but the current spun tighter, circling my legs like invisible hands. "Let go," Daniel said gently. "It's easier that way." For a heartbeat, I wanted to. The pull was so strong, the water so cold, my exhaustion so deep. I could sink into it. I could stop running, stop remembering, stop hating myself for surviving. But then, a shape moved behind him, something vast, something darker than the sea itself. It unfurled in the shadows beneath the pier, too large to belong to anything human. A tangle of limbs? Ropes? No, arms. Arms upon arms, pale and writhing, reaching up from the abyss. They brushed Daniel's shoulders tenderly, almost lovingly, before retreating again into the black. My blood froze. He wasn't alone. He'd never been alone. The whispers crescendoed, 1,000 tongues pressing against my skull, hissing, pleading, demanding. My vision blurred, my chest burned. The water crept up to my chin. "Caleb," Daniel gurgled, water spilling from his lips. "Don't fight it. It's already inside you." The water closed over my mouth before I could scream. Salt flooded my throat, burning like fire. I thrashed, arms slicing through the freezing tide, but the current was merciless, dragging me deeper beneath the pier. My head slammed against a beam, white sparks exploding across my vision. Through the blur, I saw Daniel. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't sinking. He floated, steady and calm, his cloudy eyes fixed on me as though I were the one out of place. His lips moved, words spilling into the water, carried on bubbles that burst against my face. "You belong here." Hands brushed my legs, slimy, clammy, too many of them. I looked down and wished I hadn't. Pale arms swarmed below, dozens, maybe hundreds, reaching from the darkness of the seabed. They twisted around each other, knotting into ropes of flesh, pulling, tugging. I kicked wildly, tearing free for a second, but more hands seized me, clamping onto my ankles, my calves, my wrists. Their nails were long, broken, scraping lines into my skin. The voices filled my skull, a cacophony of whispers crashing louder than the waves. Some begged, some wailed, some laughed. All of them demanded, "Join us." "Stay, drown!" The beams around me groaned and bent, barnacle-crusted wood, creaking like the ribs of some massive beast. The water swirled darker, thicker, stinking not only of salt, but of rot. Decades of rot. And then I saw them, faces in the water, children, teenagers, men, women, all pale, bloated, mouths moving soundlessly. Their eyes were blank, yet I felt their gaze pierce me. I recognized some of them from the records in the library, names I'd read, dates I'd traced, all the vanished, all here, and Daniel at the center, their anchor, their lure. He reached for me again, his voice echoing inside my skull, impossibly clear despite the water choking me. "Why should you live when we didn't?" My lungs convulsed, desperate for air. Pain lanced through my chest. Instinct screamed to breathe, to suck in anything, even if it was death. But rage surged too. Rage at myself for leaving him that day. Rage at this thing that had used his voice, his face, to drag me back. I kicked hard, wrenching one arm free, and clawed toward the surface. For a split second, my fingers broke the skin of the tide, cool air brushing them. Hope flared. Then Daniel's face twisted. His smile widened into something jagged, tearing at the corners until it was more maw than mouth. And his hands, those shriveled, water-swollen hands, latched onto my shoulders with inhuman strength. "You don't get to leave twice." He yanked me down. The pale arms erupted upward in a frenzy, coiling around me, pulling, dragging. My last breath tore free in a burst of bubbles, swallowed by the sea. Darkness closed in, and as my body thrashed its final fight, the whispers shifted. They weren't pleading anymore. They were welcoming. "Home, Caleb. Welcome home." But just before everything went black, I saw one last thing. Deep beneath the writhing arms, beneath the drowned faces, something stirred. Something massive. A shadow the size of the pier itself, coiled and waiting. I felt its gaze. Not Daniel's, not the others, but something older, endless. It had been feeding for generations, and now it had me.
I don't know how long I was under. Time lost meaning in the black. Seconds stretched like hours, hours shrank to heartbeats. My body fought, spasming against the pale arms that bound me, but already I was fading, slipping beyond the need for breath. The water wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, almost comforting, like it had wrapped me in its embrace. The whispers softened, no longer a storm but a lullaby, a tide rocking me to sleep. Daniel's face hovered inches from mine. His cloudy eyes had softened, his expression almost tender. The sound bloomed inside my head. "No more running, Dad, and no more guilt. You're one of us now." My limbs no longer obeyed. The panic drained away, leaving only stillness. The pale arms lifted me, not down but across, carrying me deeper into the heart of the pier's shadow. And there, I saw it clearly for the first time, the thing beneath. It was not a shape that belonged in this world. Its body was a tangle of limbs and torsos, faces pressed together, mouths gaping in silent cries. Not separate creatures, but fused, grown from one another, a colony of the drowned. Every missing soul from every decade, every tragedy of the pier, bound together into one writhing mass. And at its core, something older still. Something vast, eyeless, with a maw that stretched wider than the tide itself. The truth, Daniel drifted beside me, his withered hand brushing mine. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I wanted to say no, I wanted to weep. Yes. And with that single word, I felt it claim me. The last thread of myself unraveled, pulled into the chorus. A single note in the endless drowning hymn. The town whispered about me, just as they whispered about Daniel and the others before us. Another loss to the Undertow. Another fool who strayed too close to the abandoned pier. Parents warned their children, but the warnings never mattered. The tide always called someone back. Maybe yours.